Good evening. My name is Chaza right here on Ubuntu channel, and I do welcome you to the program Meet Your Leaders. And to co-host, I have Lance, who has been on sabbatical leave. Welcome back, Lance. Good evening.
Good evening, Chaza. Good evening to our viewers. And definitely, it's good to be back. Feels good to be back, and couldn't wait much longer to get back and just have this particular interaction with you, the guest, as well as also our lovely viewers out there.
Beautiful. Tonight we are actually joined by Lexina Micah Mvula, who is actually the programs manager, for care for young leaders in Africa. And tonight we'll be looking at constitution reforms, Zambia's constitution reforms. I'm excited to actually get to, listen to a young leader, giving submissions and, whatever surrounds the constitution and its reforms. Lance.
Definitely, Chaza, our constitution is a constitution that is always in everyone's mouth due to the fact that it has so many lacunas, as it has been said. And then it's amazing to see that young women are taking part in talking about the supreme law of the land, which is the constitution. And it's so exciting to also note that young people are taking interest into constitutional reforms, are taking interest into the governance of this country by looking at how best can we either fine-tune the 2016 amended constitution, or maybe doing away with the whole lot of it and then coming up with something new right from the scratch. It's really a debate that goes on in with so many people. It's really, I would say, a topic that leaves much to be desired. And believe you me, the past 3 weeks, to tell you the truth, I feel like a lawyer. I feel like I can interpret this constitution because the constitution has been the center of every discussion that a Zambian has been having. By elections, rulings happening in the judiciary, the High Court, the Supreme Court, as well as the Constitutional Court, passing landmark judgments, and then governance activists or governance experts, elections experts suing different partners in the constitution making processes, and all this going on. So it's really a big debate, a big topic that each and every well-meaning Zambian has to talk about or has to take part, so that we do not continue talking about this thing. Chaza, it's very appalling that just
It appears my co-host
our
there
neighbors.
has
All right.
I had lost you due to connectivity. It's good you are back. You can take it up from where you had left.
All right, thank you so much. So I was saying that it's very appalling to note that our neighbors, South Africa, you ask an 18-year-old boy or girl, they know the constitution. It's easy for them to interpret their constitution. They understand every article in their constitution. But hey, it's a different thing when you come to Zambia. Zambia, we have left the constitution as a preserve for the so-called lawyers, a preserve for the learned, a preserve for the
So,
elite.
Lance, just hold it there. I think we need to take it easy, just where you are, and just to make mention, we are still standing by, for our guest who is having, connectivity challenges. But I'm glad you've brought up the issue of, the complexity in the text of the Constitution itself. So now, I would like to find out, from you, Lance, because I must understand that, the background of it at the time that they were, writing the Constitution. Probably it was deliberate that, some text should be somewhat, complicated, for an ordinary Zambian to understand, such that the job for the lawyer would be there, to actually, take the issue to court, and the courts get to interpret the provisions of, the Constitution. What's your take? Is that not a good idea, or should we have, simple text so that people, an ordinary Zambian, can understand the Constitution as it were? It is said again that, the Constitution, which has the text which is easy to understand, is a good Constitution. What is your take, Lance?
Well, Chaza, what we need, we need to go back to why should there be something like a constitution? Okay, first of all, what is a constitution? So a constitution is a supreme law of the land. This is a book that has set of laws which help to govern the nation. And what is the nation? The nation is not buildings, Chaza. The nation is not the soil, but the nation is the people that are in it, inclusively with, obviously, maybe this is when you can put in properties and natural resources that are in the land. So you have this supreme law that helps to govern the nation, because a lawlessness country is a country that does not have a law, or that does not even follow any laws at all. So the constitution must be made easy for a simple Zambian, an ordinary Zambian. For my Mbuya, who is Kumunzi, when she reads, she's able to interpret it, she's able to understand what she is reading. That's what a constitution should be. A constitution should not be a prison for a few people to understand, or for them to start interpreting. Okay? This already is what has brought a problem in this land, because people, they were not selfless when amending this same constitution. They were amending, putting selfishness ahead of selflessness. This is why we are here. Okay, each and every law, each and every article that you look at in the constitution has a lacuna of its own. You may think that what you have read, you have understood it, and you may interpret it in a way that you think this is a way to interpret it. But alas, you will be shocked. You go to the penal code, there is something which is contrary to what you have understood from the article that you have read. If we even take it further, you go to the issue of elections. You understand that there's an electoral act which acts together, or hand in hand with the constitution. You find certain articles in the constitution that are differing with articles that are found in the electoral act. Then you start to wonder, how did Parliament come up with an electoral act which is supposed to come, or which is supposed to be a baby of the constitution? It sounds so different, or it is alienated from the main book, from the main law. So selflessness is what is needed for us to, if we need to have a constitution that each and every ordinary Zambian will be able to understand. I have to read to understand, Chaza. I do not have to read to react. Okay, so selflessness should come top of each and everything that is to do with the law, that is to do with the constitution of Zambia. All right, so the law-making process, or this constitution reform that we are talking about, let's get to look at article by article and identify people that will be selfless, identify people that will be selfless, identify people that are non-politically charged or non-politically aligned, if we are to have a law, a supreme law, a constitution that will speak for each and every Zambian. Unlike having people that are politically charged. Okay, when I talk about politically charged, I do not mean that you belong to a political party. No, politically charged means that you always have a political argument or agreement with whatever that comes your way or that you come across in life. Okay, so if you are not politically charged, it will be easy for you to think of your neighbor, what is good for you and what is good for your neighbor, and how you are going to live in harmony, how you are going to live with one another and moving the way forward. All right, so you are watching Meet Your Leaders on Ubuntu channel. Remember, Ubuntu is an online platform that gets to give you a platform, our dear viewer, as well as give you a platform to get to reach out to different communities. And this platform, Meet Your Leaders, is where we get to introduce to you different leaders, community leaders, church leaders, religious leaders, political leaders, and leaders that come from different backgrounds to come and discuss different issues that affect you, the general citizen. I am your host, Lance Sanibanda, and of course, introducing our guest on the program, Lexina Micah is our guest, and she is in the studios. Good evening. Allow me to call you Micah. Good evening, Micah. How are you doing today?
Good evening, thank you. I'm okay. Good evening, gentlemen. How are you?
Well, I am doing well, thank you, and welcome to Meet Your Leaders. It's so glad to have a female finally on the program.
Oh, really? Thank you for having me, and I'm glad to be part of this conversation.
Definitely, you are a first female on the program, so it's not only your debut on the program, but it's also a debut of female folks on the program, and it's also nice that you are a youth. Therefore, we look at our country moving in a very positive direction.
I deserve an applause then.
All right, so quickly, let's get into our topic of discussion. We are looking at constitutional reforms and we are looking at the Zambian constitution. First of all, for our lovely viewer out there, obviously they would want to understand what reforms are. Do you mind uh, uh, defining reforms, and then we get into the constitution and look at what exactly should be reformed.
All right. So a reform, as the word suggests, is to do something that has been done before. A form from a basic language is really just development. So when we are saying reform, we are saying either redevelop for improvement, redevelop for enhancement, or amendment. I think from a general perspective, that is what the word means. And
Hmm.
so if you were to ask the question, then what the process of reform entails, it really is looking at what is already existing and either making it better or amending it to conform to a particular context.
All right, pretty interesting. Now, um, I think maybe before getting into the main idea of what we are discussing, first of all, what one would tell is that you are a youthful person, and it's more like odd to see a young person having interest in especially governance issues or issues to do with governance, as well as talking about constitutional reforms. Where do you draw like the energy? What's the drive behind you?
Well, first of all, it is my right as a citizen on this planet called Earth It is my right to participate in the day-to-day operations of my community or constituency, and thereafter my country as a young woman, as a youth. Even when I cross the youth bracket, I'll still maintain this right to participate. I hold the right to participate in decision making, in political, civil, and social activities. So I do not only have the right to life, but I equally have the right to participate in development, the right to participate in political and civic spaces. So, irrespective of what age bracket I fall under, that right still remains.
All right, beautiful. I was actually locked out, due to connectivity. And earlier on, before myself, the guest was also done the same. It's good to see you back. And I am also back. I don't know what I have missed. I wish I could actually, get especially the introductory part so that we could get to know more about yourself, before getting into the nitty gritties. So, Lance, allow me to actually just do a rewind, what they call a rewind selector, so that probably I can have a snippet of who Lexina Micah Mvula is. Right on. Please, Micah, give me just a little bit information about yourself, your background.
Okay, my background is pretty humble. I hail from an institution called the Center for Young Leaders in Africa, Sila, Zambia, which is an institution that works to create a platform for youth to participate in various democratic and governance processes, from the smallest unit, which is our home, our family, to the highest unit, which is the world at large. So, what the Center for Young Leaders in Africa does, where I belong, is we build the capacity of young people in various areas. We do both training and mentorship, and then also encourage young people to participate in programs such as this one, which also is something I am passionate about. So a little something that is a bit personal about me. I am very, very passionate about participation and youth inclusion in all stratas of development. I have been blessed to have passed through very, very significant institutions like the Foundation for Democratic Process, like the Zambia Center for Interparty Dialogue, and right now with the Center for Young Leaders in Africa. So I do have quite a bit of knowledge and background when it comes to what my right to participate in decision making as a young person is, as well as that is my driving force. I want to see a Zambia that is inclusive, a Zambia that is economically independent, a Zambia where youth, women, and persons with disabilities are able to equally participate like the male folk, where we have legislation that is a true reflection of the aspirations of the Zambian people. And why not be the change that I want to see? That is why I have decided to take this route, not only from a career perspective, but also from a personal perspective. This is something that I am very, very passionate about.
Beautiful. I'm actually fortified by that background. We now know who exactly Micah is, and freely we can discuss the constitution reforms. Justice Holmes Jr. actually indicated that a constitution that cannot bend breaks. What are the shortcomings that are meriting, the need to actually amend the constitution of Zambia? And in your own perspective, do you think the whole constitution should actually be repealed and we get to start de novo or anew?
Well, I think the humble background is that the Constitution is the highest law of this country. And as you read Act number 2 of 2016, the preamble of the Constitution talks about us, the Zambian people, giving ourselves the Constitution. Now, if we are saying that this Constitution is given to us by ourselves, it means that, first of all, we need to own the process. And secondly, we need to protect the content of the Constitution. And thirdly, this Constitution is supposed to have the aspirations of the Zambian people today, as well as the Zambian people that are coming in the future, those that are yet to be born. And how do we ensure that we have a constitution that is a true reflection of the aspirations of the people? It is by engaging the Zambians themselves. It is me and you, the ordinary citizen, who are supposed to demand for the constitution to either be reformed through an amendment or to be repealed and replaced with something that is different. Now, if you know your history very well, you see from time immemorial how many times we have attempted as a country to reform our constitution, and largely because we feel that this constitution is not a reflection of what we want. Maybe I'll speak on behalf of the young people. If you are cognizant of how the 1964 parliament was looking like, you would agree with me that the average members of parliament were within and slightly out of the youth bracket. And you could see that we had at that time a very, very young person, aged 21, that was there to represent a group of people, speaking and making developmental decisions on behalf of the nation. If you know your history very well, you would know that I'm talking about Vernon Mwanga. Vernon Mwanga was 21 when he walked the corridors of power. But when you look at our parliament transitioning from 1964 to date, I think the sight is really, really sad, because the reflection of our demographic today is not the same as what is currently obtaining in parliament. For instance, if you look at the 2016 to 2021, prior the August 12 general elections parliament, you'll find that out of that 167 people that represent us in parliament, we only had 3 young people, representing about 1.8%, which just means that if there's a law that is supposed to support young people, or if we were to move the motion to amend the constitution as per provision in the law today, reflecting the aspirations of the people, that is practically impossible. So what we want as young people, yes, we want this constitution reviewed. We want it replaced, repealed and replaced to reflect now the actual facts that are obtaining. For example, we would like the provisions in the constitution that create the kind of electoral system that we have now to change. We are not able to achieve representation of women, youth, and persons with disabilities in our parliament because of the type of electoral system that we have today. I think if you again know or have done a little bit of research, you agree with me that the first past the post or the majoritarian or simple plurality electoral system is really not the best when it comes to issues of inclusion. And it is among the least type of electoral systems that are used in the world, largely because it is not the best when it comes to speaking to issues of including marginalized groups. And you know that we are currently undergoing a census, right? And from the statistics prior to this census, we are able to tell that the representation in terms of demographics of youth and women is higher than that of what we are seeing in parliament. But that cannot be reflected because we have an exclusionary electoral system. And this can only change if we amend the constitution.
All right, we need to actually have the constitution as the law provides in the constitution. Article 1, that, the constitution of Zambia is sacrosanct. It is the supreme law of the land. But again, these other laws that are, being enacted are seemingly repugnant to the constitution. And one of which that has been problematic is the Public Order Act. It's been an outcry that, this law is actually repugnant, to the constitution. Do you think this, specific act of parliament should be repealed, replaced, or just amended? What's your take about this particular act of parliament?
I think the Zambian people have spoken, and you agree with me that this law is actually being recalled to be repealed and replaced. And we have reached advanced stages as a country when it comes to the replacement of this Public Order Act. The outcry really has been that it has not been applied well. It has been used as a tool for manipulation, especially against opposition political parties versus those that are in government or the ruling party, so to say. And the reason has been that there's been too much of misinterpretation of the law itself. And the generation before me calls it a colonial law, which somewhat I agree with, because it has been misunderstood. You and I will agree that during an election, there are times when a request is sent to the police informing them, which the law prescribes actually, that the police is just supposed to be informed that there's supposed to be a gathering and they're supposed to provide somewhat some kind of support. But it has been misinterpreted to it being a permit and not an information. And the police or the police service has been using this in the past to say, we cannot allow you to do ABCD because of 1, 2, 3, when the act actually does not provide for that. So what the Zambian people want, and I think, like I earlier alluded, we have already reached advanced phases. We saw the Zambia Law Development Commission go around the country receiving submissions from different stakeholders, including ourselves, asking for what we would like to see changed in that piece of legislation. And so the aspirations of the Zambian people must prevail. And to just agree with you, any law in this country that goes contrary to the constitution is void to the level of its inconsistency.
Brilliant. We've seen some positions that are seemingly, conflicting. The position of ECZ, the position of, the CONCORT as regard, the Kwacha and Kabushi parliamentary by-elections. And also, we are yet to hear, or rather we heard, was it yesterday from the High Court also? What do you make of, this situation where, the court rules in a manner as it were? Are we now saying the government by the rule of law is here? Because I've seen holdings that are away from, the favor of government.
First of all, it's not really right to discuss an issue that is before the courts of law. I think you agree with me. But then secondly, to speak on the issue of the rule of law, it is important to understand the jurisdictions that these two separate courts have. The High Court and the Constitutional Court are two different courts. The Constitutional Court is largely there to interpret provisions of the Constitution. And because the High Court is somewhat a lower court, because the Concourt is at par with the Supreme Court, they are bound by the decision of the Constitutional Court. The Constitutional Court is a court of no appeal. Whereas when you have a matter heard in the High Court, you can appeal to the Supreme Court or to the Constitutional Court if it's an issue that pertains to the High Court. So to be on the safe side, I would suggest that we wait for the judgment. I know that there's been a statement that has been issued by the Electoral Commission of Zambia saying that the elections have been stayed until further notice. So we wait for that issue to be resolved by the courts of law.
Just to take you back on the same question, mine is not actually the content per se or the cases that are in court. I'm only trying to find out from you your perspective as regards, such a decision which is not in favor of the government. Are we saying, because this in the past was not there, right now it appears that the government does not have its hand in the rulings that are coming from these courts? Are we saying the courts are now independent? Your viewpoint?
Well, that is an assumption that in the previous regimes we've not had independence of the judiciary, and now we are seemingly seeing the judiciary acting more independently. It is really an assumption, and we have not gathered evidence in that regard. So it would not be right for us to uphold that assertion. So until we are able to prove that fact, I think for now, let's see the direction that this whole electoral petition and the judgments as well as interpretation of the Constitution will take.
Brilliant. We've actually seen quite a number of provisions in the Constitution that, we wouldn't call a cake, as it guarantees, all sorts of, rights. And I've heard you talking about repealing the Constitution and probably replacing it. Are we saying generally the Constitution that we have is bad, or is just these specific provisions that should be changed? Do you think it's really a good idea to repeal the whole Constitution and come up with the new one?
Yes. Well, when we say we repeal a piece of legislation, we don't really mean that we throw everything away entirely. No. The question we need to ask ourselves is, what is the problem with the current Constitution? And where do we start with when it comes to improving the Constitution? It would also be wrong for us to begin a Constitution review process without looking at what has happened in the past. I think if we are going to have a conversation of repealing and replacing the Constitution, we need to look at what is currently obtaining in the current Constitution versus what has been recommended time and again by the various Constitution review commissions that have come. And then we ask ourselves the question, why have we failed to include some of the recommendations? Because you agree with me that in the past Constitution review commissions, there's been somewhat extensive consultations of stakeholders. But our cry is really that we need to overhaul the entire constitution making process itself. The model at which, or the model that we use to develop the Constitution is not really the best. If you understand the Inquiries Act, initially what is supposed to happen is that as the Zambian people, like I earlier mentioned, we are the ones who are supposed to say, okay, we don't like this Constitution. And we write to the powers that be to say we would like this Constitution repealed, replaced, or amended. But what has been happening in the past has been that the constitution making process has been tied to a political discussion. And because of that, there is always a feeling that when a particular party in power is amending a constitution, they have a party or personal agenda to propel, which is not supposed to be the case. What is supposed to happen is that all of us, you and me, including our dear grandmother, are supposed to participate in the constitution making process. They need to have a say, because the law that we are going to come up with ultimately is going to affect them somehow, somewhere. So yes, we need to replace this constitution. Yes, we need to repeal this constitution. And yes, we need to have a much more consultative process. And as we are talking about repealing and replacing the constitution, we also need to review the Inquiries Act, which provides for how our constitution making process is supposed to be.
Beautiful. We've talked about the process itself. We saw that the constitution has got the rigid part which requires the referendum for it to be amended or changed or repealed or anything like that. An attempt was done in the year 2016 to actually amend the Bill of Rights, Part 3 of the Constitution, so as to include economic rights. Do you think this part of the Constitution also is supposed to be amended? Is
Yes.
it time that Zambia included economic rights in the Bill of Rights?
I think it's long overdue. Part 3 of the Constitution is rigid intentionally, first of all, so that we are not seeing a situation where people's rights are infringed and manipulated. However, it is important for us to amend this part of the Constitution, because it's now is supposed to provide for certain rights, like you have mentioned, the economic, the political, the civil, the social rights. Those are supposed to be there, because if I go to without that provision in the Constitution, I cannot go to the hospital today and find there is no medicine and hold this government accountable. I can't. So if we want to strengthen our accountability mechanisms, if we want to strengthen the rule of law, if we want to uphold some of the international instruments that we have signed as a country, we need to also amend the Bill of Rights. We need to include some of the very good provisions that may have been included in the failed referendum in 2016 into our new constitution. And that is why we really, really need to repeal and replace this constitution.
At that time, it failed. The referendum failed. What do you think could have been the problem, and what do you think would be a better means of having a successful, referendum as to vote yes or no, the Bill of Rights should be amended?
First of all, I feel that the timing was not the best. I understand that as a country, we were trying to be economically effective when we decided to hold the referendum side by side with an election that was very, very critical as well. I feel that we did not adequately educate the participants in that referendum. There was a lot of propaganda that was going on around the content of the referendum, or rather the content in the amendment to the Bill of Rights. We did not do a good job raising awareness and ensuring that the provisions that were going to be included in the new Bill of Rights were understood, and the consequences of us not having those provisions in the Bill of Rights as well should have been understood. And because of the time that that referendum was being held, everything that was progressive was turned into a joke. It was turned into political weapons that were used for and against political parties. And at the end of the day, both the political parties that were in power and the political parties that were out of power lost out on a good opportunity to strengthen our constitution and improve the livelihoods of Zambian people somewhat. So
I'm so excited with
if we are looking to see that we succeed this time, I think it is very important for us to consider investing very well in raising awareness, as well as sensitizing the Zambian people on the provisions in the amended Bill of Rights and what the consequences would be should that bill pass. The advantages and disadvantages, both at personal level as a citizen, as well as the responsibility that comes with those rights, vis-a-vis the responsibility that government will have to ensure that these rights are upheld.
You are really terra firma. I greatly appreciate, and I am fortified with your response on that one. Allow me to invite my co-host to come in and also ask one or two questions. Then on the other side, we invite comments and also those that would like to join us in the studio. Lance, over to you.
Thank you so much, Chaza. And well, quite an informative young lady that we have. Like I said on the start, allow me to call you Micah, as was shown on the screen. Let me take you back to Chaza's question on the needed amendment of, in fact, if it should be amendment or repeal of the Public Order Act. As rightly put, this has been a thorn in the life of mostly politicians, those that are in the opposition, as it is always used by those in power to curtail down movement as well as assembly of their political opponents. In this case, Micah, don't you think there's need of repealing this whole archaic law? I also call it archaic law, despite not coming from the 1956 when it was enacted by the white people who were looking at curtailing down then revolutionaries that were fighting for independence of our country. Don't you think we need to completely do away with this and come up with a brand new document or bill that will speak or that will stand for the betterment of each and every Zambian, despite their different political affiliations?
Well, the Public Order Act, first of all, does not just deal with political parties, and I agree with you that the most stakeholder that has been seen in the limelight around this piece of legislation are the political parties. Otherwise, the public order really, as the name connotes, public order, is meant to provide an orderly and organized public. And this means that we need to have legislation that does not infringe on the rights of people, the right to assembly, the right to associate. Yeah. And so, yes, we are agreeing to the fact that this law needs to be repealed and replaced. Like I earlier alluded, I think this process has already begun. The Zambia Law Development Commission, which is an institution that has been seen to pioneer or lead law development in this country with support from the Ministry of Justice, have already started and consulting stakeholders. And stakeholders have made submissions to the Law Development Commission in terms of what they would want to see in the new piece of legislation. So yes, we are agreeing with the fact that it needs to be repealed. it needs to be replaced, and it needs to reflect the aspect of human rights. It needs to reflect the aspirations of the Zambian people. It needs to reflect also the new waves of change, because like you have said, this law is a colonial law, and there are some provisions in that law that were created to infringe on the space and the rights of the Zambian people at the time.
All right. Now, my worry, Micah, mostly comes in this way. Most of the times, Zambians, an ordinary Zambian, will be engaged by those that are politically charged in the topic of constitution reforms, when they feel that somehow or somewhat this part of the law is sitting down on them. For example, we are now talking constitutional reforms because a certain political party feels that they are being trampled upon, or they feel they don't have the space of practicing freely or doing whatever that they do in their political arena or in their political areas. Should reforms only come in when a politician feels like they are infringed, or reforms should really genuinely come in, and even a mere Zambian as Lance can call for constitutional reforms?
Reforms are, first of all, inevitable. And then I would like to remind ourselves that that so-called politician is a Zambian first before they're a politician. So if they feel that a certain piece of legislation infringes on a certain part of their rights or does not reflect their aspirations, they have the right to demand for legislative reforms. The scenario you have given, where the ordinary Zambian person is only involved when a political party feels like, it is largely because we as Zambians have allowed ourselves to lose interest in issues of governance, to relegate them to conversations for the learned, and which is not supposed to be the case. Because if we are going to talk about, for example, the laws that pertain to taxation, you and I pay tax every day. But how many of us know the provisions and the legislation around taxation? You and I use the road every day. We have an act of parliament that secures our road safety, that secures and provides for insurance. How many of us know that? So it really is an issue of us having, first of all, primary interest as Zambian people in knowing what are the guiding principles and documents that guide us as Zambians. And then secondly, it is an issue of ensuring that we are hearing and having these conversations every day, and not to make them a preserve of the so-called politicians or the learned colleagues masquerading as lawyers. It's not supposed to be like that. And law is meant to guide existence. It's meant to balance existence. And so if we are going to allow ourselves to turn a blind eye, we will always cry foul until we get to a point where we have a citizenry that is interested in the day-to-day activities of the nation as a whole. We will never ever have a citizenry that is enlightened. I'll give you an example of our debt status as a country. Very few of us know, but all of us at some point will feel the impact of how much debt we have accrued as a country, and we'll see it reflect in the way our economy is going to be behaving. But when Parliament is having those debates around policy and around legislation, rather not policy, how many of us even know what is being tabled in Parliament? largely because, again, there's a communication breakdown between those who are duty bearers and us who are right holders. And then there's somewhat deliberate intention not to make the citizen informed, because once you have an informed citizenry, they are able to hold their leaders accountable.
All right. Thank you so much, Micah. I think lastly, my question, as we also get to involve our viewers, either via coming through into the studio or reading through the messages that they've sent through. You will agree with me that the past 3 weeks have been the busiest weeks of each and every Zambian's life. We all became lawyers, or we have all become lawyers anyway. We are constitutional lawyers, we are court lawyers, we are lawyers in each and every aspect. Why is it so? Because of a simple parliamentary by-election, a judgment that was given by first the High Court and then also the Constitutional Court riding on it. This is in the nullification of or disqualification of an election in Kabushi and Kwacha, which the High Court did, and then the Constitutional Court as well said, yes, there was a nullification there. Now, one article was put up for debate. It should be Article 72, sub-article 4G or H, if I'm not mistaken, which talks about disqualification. So we were all taught, or we were all in a debacle of trying to understand what is the difference between nullification, disqualification. Each and everybody interpreted this thing in their own way, how they understood it, including the so-called learned lawyers had their own say to it. Whatever that was put across, alas, the Constitutional Court came back and ruled that they did not disqualify the two that brought about a by-election. But when you go to Article 72(4) subsection H, it says if a by-election is caused as a result of the court. So the court caused that by-election. But again, they came back and said in their ruling they did not disqualify. So here it's like the Constitution has been exposed together with the Electoral Act. Both these two great books or laws have been exposed in terms of the lacunas that are in them. And even up to now, we still have court cases where you have seen McDonald Chipenzi taking the Attorney General in the High Court on Article 52, should be sub-article 2, that talks about resignation of an independent. So all this whole thing, don't you think this is a serious call for a complete overhaul of, this Constitution? Let's start from scratch, from one, and we should have selfless Zambians sitting down, those that are not politically charged or politically inclined, to sit down and, of course, take part in at least a new constitution. Maybe this one will be perfect.
I'm not sure I get the question there. Are we asking that we amend, repeal, or replace the Constitution? Is that the question?
We do a complete overhaul of the Constitution. Let's start from scratch. From preamble.
Well, I agree with you. There is need to replace the Constitution. But again, replacement does not mean throwing away what is good. I think we need to look at some of the contentious issues in the current Constitution and then ask the Zambian people what they want. Because remember, the preamble of the Constitution does not say political party X gives the Zambian people the Constitution. No. The preamble of the Constitution talks about we, the Zambian people, giving ourselves the Constitution. So what we are refusing, even as young people, is to have a constitution-making process that is exclusive. We want a constitution-making process that will include us, and one where the process and the content are protected. Because if you look at what has been happening in the past, there will be a constitution reform commission that is constituted. They'll go around the country receiving submissions, and then after that it is subjected to a group of people who sit down and consolidate those recommendations. But then when you come to see the final result of the Constitution, you'll find out that some very progressive recommendations for amendment are missing. And so for us, our cry, even as we are overhauling or replacing or amending the Constitution, we would like to see a constitution-making process, first of all, that is protected, a process that is very clear and transparent, but also a process where our content is protected and guarantee is given that when the Zambian person participates in this exercise, the constitution that we come up with at the end of the day will not be a political party constitution. It will not be a sector constitution, but it will be a Zambian constitution that is relatable, that responds to the desires and the aspirations of the Zambian people. And we want a constitution-making process that does not use some of the models of adoption that we have seen in the past, because the reason why we have failed as a country to have a constitution that is said to have stood the test of time is because of how we have chosen to adopt our constitution. If we are going to subject the constitution to a parliamentary adoption process or a sector adoption process, we are likely to have another constitution-making process when this government leaves.
Chaza.
All right. Having said, that about adoption, I'd like to find out, from you, which mode of adoption is the best?
Well, I must put a disclaimer. I'm speaking for myself and not on behalf of my institution. From my personal standpoint, a simple constituency assembly or a simple referendum would work for us to adopt the constitution and not subject it to members of parliament who we elect ourselves and say represent us. But we have seen in the past how political parties have forgotten, rather members of parliament have forgotten the vehicle through which they went to that house called National Assembly, which is to speak for the people that put them in that office, the electorate, and they have been seen to side with the desires of their political party against the desires of the people that voted for them in that office. So to protect the content and to protect the desires and aspirations of the Zambian people and to have the Zambian people on that constitution, we need to change the mode of adoption of our constitution to either a referendum with a simple majority or a constituency assembly.
Thank you so much, Micah. I'd like to find out from you. We have the new dawn in government that has been in ruling 1 year and probably some weeks. Do you think there's any difference in terms of governance, this regime and the past regimes?
I think governance is not a one size fits all. Every government and every regime that comes has its own flaws, its own strengths. And I must say there are some things that we can commend the UPND government for, and then there are some things that we can still cheer them on in terms of them strengthening how they are working. For example, we can say the UPND is somewhat allowing it is somewhat allowing the young people to kind of thrive. They have provided, yes, for a huge amount in terms of allocation under the Constituency Development Fund, but we are yet to find evidence as to how many young people have actually benefited from the Constituency Development Fund. And we are yet to also find out how many women have benefited from this Constituency Development Fund, because we do not want a situation where 9, 10 months after the implementation of the budget has begun, we have constituencies where this fund is not being accessed. We would like to find out as a way of really assessing how this government has worked. We would like to do an audit in terms of our levels of corruption as a country, because we have heard the UPND sing this song of them fighting corruption. Is it really a holistic fight, or is it just them being vindictive and trying to pursue certain people they had grudges and agendas against in the previous regime? So we really need to have evidence before we can argue and say, yes, this government has done this. But then also, we would like to say we have seen something that is good. We are seeing our kwacha stabilizing against foreign currencies. And there was an article a few weeks ago that I saw that was saying the Zambian kwacha was one of the best performing currencies in the world against foreign currencies. So we can say that, yes, there have been some successes that we have scored with this new government, but I think they still have room to do better. You have heard the young people complain about the monthly review of fuel pump prices and how that is affecting our budgeting, the upscale of our goods and services, and we are hearing that that is likely to reduce. So we are yet to see, but we are saying thumbs up to what they have done so well, and cheering them on, giving them enough rope to hang themselves in terms of improvement.
Beautiful. We are greatly, humbled to have, you here on the program. At this point in time, would like to invite, the messages that have been sent, so that we read them right here. And if there's anyone that would like to join us in the studio, you may bring them on. I invite you, Lance, to help me read the messages.
All right, thank you so much. So Paikanimbao says, a splendid introduction from Micah. Please keep it up. We need such from young people. Mr. Mbao, thank you so much for that message. And Chaza, just to let you know, he was my classmate at the Zambia Air Services Training Institute.
Oh, all right, beautiful. So
Mwenda says, nice discussion. We need selfless people to formulate the constitution. Mwenda Mumbuna, thank you so much. We really appreciate. And then Talala Lawrence says, imagine in 2026 having one presidential candidate resigning 3 days before the election repeatedly for 60 times using different people. We would clock 5 years without an election. Godfrey Mianda advised not to sign the constitution with eyes closed. Here we are now. An interesting input right there, Lawrence. Thank you so much for that input. As we await for more messages, as well as our lovely viewer, remember that you can come through into the studio. Join us live into the studio. We have shared with you the studio link. Simply click on it, and then join us in the studio and have a one-on-one with Micah, our guest, or ask a question as well as express a view. Remember, this program is tailor-made for you so that we discuss pertinent issues that are affecting Mother Zambia. Ruben Jerome Mulungu says, why can't just pick on the old draft constitution, e.g. the Mungomba draft, and make law? It's better, they are better
Chaza,
than...
I'm losing you.
All right. So Mulungu, can you get me now?
You are really faint.
All right. How about now? Can you get me?
Better.
All right. So Mulungu says, why can't we just pick on the old draft constitution, e.g. the Mungomba draft, and make law? It's better, they are better than the current constitution. All right, Ruben, thank you so much for that particular input. All right, so Talala Lawrence comes back and says, Council Article 72.4 of the Constitution is very clear, and I quote, a person who causes a vacancy in the National Assembly due to the reasons specified under Clause 2, A, B, C, D, G, and H shall not, during that term of Parliament,
Chaza, please put your mic properly. I can barely hear you.
Okay. How about now? Can you get me?
Yes, that's better.
All right. So we are reading Lawrence's question again, or input. He says, Council, Article 72.4 of the Constitution is very clear, and I quote, a person who causes a vacancy in the National Assembly due to the reasons specified under Clause 2, A, B, C, D, G, and H shall not, during that term of Parliament, A, be eligible to contest in an election. The two former MPs caused a vacancy in the National Assembly, and the law says as long as you cause a vacancy due to the reasons specified above, then you are not eligible to contest. The two can only contest in 2026. Obviously, the continuation of this message says when life of this parliament is done. All right, so our dear viewer, you can join us in the studio by simply clicking on the link that we have provided for you in the comment section. We'll be glad to hear from you and also to have a one-on-one interaction with you as we have our guest, Micah, discussing constitutional reforms, of course, the Constitution of Zambia. Now, Micah, let me get you back to the other comment that came through, or maybe we start with Mulungu's comment. Why can't we get the previous or the other reforms, the other amendments or suggestions that were made, like the Mungomba, and put them into law, and like maybe coming up with a new old document?
I'm struggling to hear you, but let me attempt to answer the question in part according to what I have heard. Please affirm if the question is asking why can't we use recommendations from previous constitution review commissions, such as the Mungomba Constitution Review Commission? Is that the question?
Yes, indeed, it is the question.
All right, I would like to begin answering that question with a question. If I was to ask what your aspirations were 20 years ago, would they be the same today? I don't think so. And we have young people today who were not part of that exercise. And prior, or should I say post that review commission, there's been other review commissions that have, or other forms of constitution review that have come. And you are able to see that they may not have departed entirely from what the recommendations would have been from this particular review commission, but there's been addition of more and more progressive recommendations to be included in our constitution. And the risk that we run with just saying, let's look at what has been done in the past, it is us again who still come back and say this process was not a true reflection of the Zambian people. It is us who are going to say that aspiration X and Y that I would have loved included in the constitution will be left out. And so it would mean that we would begin overhauling the constitution all over again. Now, why are we saying that we need to do this process again? Trends have changed, times have changed, people have changed, aspirations have changed. And this is not void to say that the generations that come after us will accept this constitution. Let's take, for example, the American Constitution, the cream of constitutions, so to say. The American Constitution is over 400 years old. And this is because when the Constitution was being written, it was being written from a spirit of the Americans, not a spirit of one individual. It's a very small group of people, yes, that sat to write the Constitution. But you're able to see that some of the provisions in that Constitution are still alive to the needs and desires as well as the aspirations of the American people. So, if we allow ourselves to do a good job with this new constitution, we are able to create a constitution for ourselves that is a reflection of what the person who was making that recommendation, the team that is on the panel in terms of programming from your end, as well as myself and the generations that are yet to come, will stand up and say, yes, we did a good job, and posterity will hold us in high esteem for doing a good job making the constitution.
Beautiful. Do we have any other, message that has not been attended to? Lance, have we addressed all the concerns from our viewers?
All right, we have another message that has come through. This one comes from Chibonta Jule. He says, is it just our constitution or even other countries also have constitutions that always need interpretation? Why can't the constitution be in plain language that a layman can understand? Thank you so much, Chibonta. Micah, a very pertinent question right there. Is it only Zambia that has a constitution that we discuss about every day? Or maybe other countries are also going through this same thing. And why can't we just write the constitution in plain language and we wouldn't need lawyers to start interpreting it?
Well, no, it's not only Zambia, unfortunately. If you look at maybe let me start by saying there are two types of a constitution. There's a written constitution and unwritten constitution. So I'll refer to the written constitution, which is what we are using in Zambia. If you are to look at countries that have written constitutions, you will see that they are all somewhat similar in terms of phrases as well as choice of words, as well as sentencing, simply because that is a standard. But we have seen endeavors made, even in this country, where a piece of legislation has been taken from the legal jargon to a simplified version. Why? Because we want the layman, the users of that piece of legislation, to understand what the provisions mean. It doesn't have to take, it shouldn't take rather somebody going to school and being able to read what the word jurisdiction means for them to understand what is provided for in the Constitution. So our recommendation in this regard to that question would be that as we make the Constitution, can we also have a citizen or a simplified version of the Constitution, one that provides the basic minimums for a layman to be able to understand, one that is translated into our local languages, as well as one that is translated into sign language, and one in form of a braille jacket or one in braille, so that accessibility to the highest law of the land is not limited to a few Zambians, but it is as inclusive as is possible.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Please, Chaza,
Please,
go ahead.
go ahead. Very interesting indeed.
Gentlemen,
All
you
right.
are very faint.
Are you able to get me now?
I'm really struggling.
Okay,
How about
probably
me?
it could be
Get me now.
an issue of connectivity. Director, if we do not have any more messages and no one is, joining us, especially that time is ahead of us, we are actually making conclusion as I get to give 1 minute to our guest for her just to give us a wrap. Micah, please, under 1 minute, your last words on the program.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. My last remarks are a call on the youth, a call on the women, a call on persons with disabilities, and a call on the Zambian people, both here in Zambia and in the diaspora. Let us stand united to call for a constitution-making process, one that is inclusive, as well as an electoral change, a change in our electoral system that will allow or provide for direct or proportional seats for marginalized groups such as women, youth, and persons with disabilities. We only have one Zambia, and if we do not make a change in our country, no one will do it for us. We need to move away from the narrative of complaining about an issue and moving to us doing something about that issue we are complaining about. It's been great being here. Thank you for the privilege to share our thoughts. We hope that we can be invited back as an institution and hope that we can have more women featured on the show as well. Thank you, gentlemen, very much. And thank you to everybody that took their time to comment and to listen in.
Beautiful. We are also profoundly humbled and delighted to actually host you on the program. And, an invitation and many more invitations are definitely guaranteed. It is definitely our pleasure. Ladies and gentlemen that have been listening and viewing, it's been a pleasure to have you, like always, every Wednesday on Meet Your Leaders. Not forgetting my co-host, Lance. It's been great to be with you. And welcome back from, your sabbatical leave, as it were. For now, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a great pleasure. Do join us even next week on this program. I've been Chaza right here on Meet Your Leaders. Till then, God bless you all.